Number 5 on this list is that Lovecraft was never human. Lovecraft may have looked human on the exterior, he may have even spoke the same language as us, eaten the same foods as us, but he was never actually from our species. If you look up the work of H.P. Lovecraft, there is one resounding word that comes to mind to describe it. Weird. And that's not a knock against his stories, they're great, but even diehard fans will admit that they're weird at their core. A lot of the creatures that he describes in his stories have forms that us humans can't even recognize. Yog-Sothoth, for instance, is a completely incomprehensible being that defies visualization. That's really cool to think about, but let's piece that back to Lovecraft. Maybe that's the way that he saw humans. Maybe all of these creatures that came from his mind were just representations of us. Because he wasn't human, he couldn't even understand what we were as a species. We can go further with this too. Lovecraft is noted as hating sex. His wife was even reported as saying that the very mention of the word sex seemed to upset him. Now, I completely understand that sex isn't for everyone, and just because you may not enjoy it doesn't mean that you're not human at all. But that's also your wife who's come out and said that. Lovecraft also had a deep fascination with science, especially space. For a long time it said that he wanted to be an astronomer. Even when he was dying of cancer, he was recording every piece of data in his journal. Is it possible that maybe he was so fascinated with space and science because he knew that he wasn't actually human and was looking for some kind of other life form? Was he actually just another being in disguise? Is it possible that the stuff he was writing about were memories or representations of what his species actually was? We probably won't ever know, but I guess that's what makes it an urban legend to begin with. Number 4 on this list is that Lovecraft was actually possessed. Now, whether he was possessed by a demon, a ghostly spirit, or potentially even one of the creatures that he wrote about, that's unknown. The general thought is, though, that this being was inherently evil and was trying to take control of Lovecraft his whole life. We get this urban legend from some things that happened to Lovecraft the man rather than Lovecraft the writer. For instance, it's said that Lovecraft was riddled with horrible night terrors. Night terrors are different than nightmares. Night terrors are far more vivid than nightmares, and they cause the person who's experiencing them to physically move their bodies, scream, and attempt to escape what feels like a walking dream. People who get them have even been known to walk around in a nightmarish sleepwalk trying to get out of the prison in their mind. These night terrors are often linked to people who are dealing with a demonic possession as well. A demon will torment you in your sleep, and your brain will try to do anything it can to get out of that reality. It's possible that he was possessed by some creature as well based on what happened to his parents. H.P. Lovecraft was born into a well-off family, but that changed almost immediately after he came into the world. Winfield Scott Lovecraft, H.P.'s father, was committed to a mental hospital when H.P. was only 3. He apparently had developed some very bad psychosis and could no longer discern his reality. He lost his mind and only a few years later died in that hospital. His mother, Sarah Susan Phillips Lovecraft, also ended up in the same mental institute several years later and died there as well. Potentially this demon possessing Lovecraft had somehow affected his parents and slowly deteriorated their minds. It's a stretch for sure, but when we pivot over to some of the deeply disturbing things that Lovecraft had written about in his career, I can certainly see how it's plausible. Number 3 on this list is that Lovecraft received visions from eldritch entities. If you don't know what those are, then a Monsters fan page says that this category consists of beings whose appearance the human mind cannot even begin to comprehend. A mainstay of Howard Phillips Lovecraft's work, where the term arguably originated, these entities conform to no rules, patterns, or laws as the human race recognizes them. Some of the well-known eldritch entities in the Lovecraftian universe are Cthulhu, Yog-Sothoth, and Shoggoth. A popular urban legend is that these beings didn't just come from H.P.'s imagination, but they were actually communicating with him the whole time. Let's take Cthulhu for instance. Cthulhu is an eldritch entity that is said to be in a deep slumber at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. It's locked away in a sunken city and it's waiting for the day to wake up and get free again. Even though it's in this slumber, it's believed that Cthulhu's mind is still working and functional. Now, one of Cthulhu's main abilities is the power to communicate telepathically with people. It's thought that potentially that's where all this stuff came from. Everything in the Lovecraftian universe is actually real and true to life, and H.P. Lovecraft was chosen to inform the human race about it. This entity communicated with him telepathically for his whole life, and he simply wrote what was being told to him. Now this begs the question, why H.P. Lovecraft? And maybe because this being knew that he was a good writer and would be able to take what they tell him and put it to the page. Maybe they knew that he had just the type of mind that would listen to this voice and trust it. Maybe it was just all random and a being like Cthulhu could have just as easily picked you or me. It's hard to say for certain, but if this theory is correct, then we may still have our chance of being chosen, because it means that everything is real and Cthulhu is possibly just a boat ride away. Number 2 on this list is that Lovecraft was clinically insane. Now I want you to think back to some of the entries on this list that I've already talked about and some of the things that he did. Now start to connect them with the possibility of insanity. Starts to make a little bit of sense, huh? Lovecraft was always classified as a super weird guy. Really eccentric, out there with crazy ideas, stuff that your typical person wouldn't think about. Now this by no means makes him clinically insane, but it apparently does run in the family. It's been proven that mental illness is something that can be passed down generation to generation and that genetics are involved. And as I mentioned earlier, both of his parents ended up going to a mental institute in their lives and then ultimately dying there. Not only would that incident of them going there have been very draining on HP's mental state, but also that he may be more susceptible to mental illness just based on his family. It's also said that H.P. Lovecraft inspired the stories of Batman. Is it possible that the biggest inspiration that he gave to those stories though wasn't Batman or the world of Batman, but potentially the Joker, or some of the other famous insane Batman villains? Arkham Asylum is filled with clinically insane, eccentric Batman villains, and maybe there's a reason why that was inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. Also, in the previous entry we talked about how eldritch entities could potentially be speaking to him. Well, what if he only thought that they were, but they actually weren't? What if he truly believed that someone like Cthulhu was speaking to him, but really that was just another voice in his head? Were all of these entities voices in Lovecraft's mind? Maybe that's why an eldritch entity can't be comprehended by a human eyeball, because it was only ever in his brain. Next time you pick up a Lovecraft novel, give it a read with this in mind. You might discover a thing or two that others have missed. Number 1 on this list is that the Necronomicon is real. I'm going to read off Sarah McLean's answer on Quora to describe to you what the Necronomicon is. The Necronomicon is the most dangerous book known to man. It's an ancient grimoire written by Abdul al-Harad and is full of disturbing rituals and spells to summon the Great Old Ones. The Great Old Ones are eldritch outer gods that are more terrible than humanity can conceive. Just encountering them will drive you to madness. Now that's what our Quora user had to say about this, but the one thing though is that this is all fictional. The Necronomicon is exactly how Sarah described it, except it was written about by H.P. Lovecraft in part of the Cthulhu mythos. Therefore, it's a fictional book that was never actually created, or at least that's what people believe. Now you can buy rip-off versions of the Necronomicon on Amazon or other bookstores, but none of them will have been written by H.P. Lovecraft himself. However, there is an urban legend that H.P. Lovecraft actually wrote the Necronomicon before he passed away, and there is a single manuscript out there somewhere. This would be roughly a 700-page document going into depth on how to summon these Great Old Ones. This text would probably be cursed, and maybe the reason that we haven't even seen it before is because those who read it don't last long enough to show the world. H.P. Lovecraft sounds like the type of person who would want a legacy surrounding him, and writing a single text of this ancient grimoire for the world to find, that's exactly the way to do it. Number 5 on this list is summoning him. Krampus, being the half-goat, half-demon creature that he is, wouldn't really be the type of character that you'd want showing up to your Christmas party unexpectedly. That being said though, it hasn't stopped some people from actually trying to summon him. There are a few variations on how to do this, but none are particularly proven. The whole idea of summoning Krampus in the first place got a big boost in popularity after the horror comedy movie entitled Krampus was released in 2015. Now the inciting incident in that movie is when one of the main characters, a boy named Max, rips up his letter to Santa Claus as he loses his festive spirit, and then Krampus shows up to haunt the family shortly after that. This kinda got people wondering if there was any validity to this summoning technique and if they could rip up their letter to Santa Claus to summon Krampus themselves. Well, I am here to tell you that summoning Krampus isn't quite as simple as Hollywood portrayed it to be. In fact, even though there are several potential methods circulating around the internet, there isn't one confirmed method yet. Some have said that to summon him you need to take the blood of a goat and use it in a satanic ritual where you then vandalize Christmas paraphernalia. Others have tried to completely destroy any signs of Christmas and have the worst Christmas spirit ever, basically be a Grinch. Neither of these have worked and don't seem to have any legitimacy to them though. In actuality, it seems like the only way to get Krampus to show up to your doorstep is if you've been bad all year long. And even if you have done this, there's no guarantee that he's actually going to come. It's probably a good thing that there's no confirmed method to summoning him though, because willingly bringing this guy around probably isn't the best idea. Number 4 on this list is his torture lair. Krampus is inherently evil and will beat who've been bad all year round. He's truly the antithesis to Santa Claus, who will reward good behavior with presents. The beatings that Krampus doles out can be rather brutal. Legend says that he'll carry around a bundle of sticks and that's his weapon of choice for delivering these beatings. However, there are also some stories of Krampus being far more brutal than just the sticks. That getting hit with this bundle of sticks is actually the good side of Krampus, and for those who've been really bad, you'll get far worse. The authentic legend says that on December 5th and 6th in Austria, Krampus will go around with St. Nicholas and beat who've been bad. Whilst he's doing this, St. Nicholas will be going into the good children's homes and leaving presents for their good deeds over the year. Some variations on the legend though say that Krampus doesn't just come into your home to beat you, but comes into your home to take you away. Krampus is said to have a basket strapped to his back, but this basket, it's not filled with a bunch of presents. It's actually filled with a bunch of children. Children that Krampus has kidnapped and is now taking back to his evil lair. What happens at this evil lair? That's not currently known, but there's no limit to how bad things could get. People believe that Krampus has a full-on torture chamber for the children whose souls are so bad that there's no saving them. That these bad children will be taken into this torture chamber and kept there for the rest of their lives. For most kids, Krampus is only dangerous around Christmas time, but for these unlucky souls, Krampus would be year-round. Some people say though that Krampus will just eat the here, which, as horrible as it seems, might actually be better than being kept in his torture chamber for eternity. Hopefully, none of these legends are actually true though, and have just been exaggerated as time has gone on. Number 3 on this list is that Krampus is the son of Hell. Hell, spelled H-E-L, isn't in reference to the place, but actually a person. Britannica says that Hell was originally the name of the world of the dead. It later came to mean the goddess of death. Hell was one of the children of the trickster god Loki, and her kingdom was said to lie downward and northward. It was called Niflheim, or the World of Darkness, and appears to have been divided into several sections, one of which was the Nostrand, the Shore of Corpses. There stood a castle facing north. It was filled with the venom of serpents, in which murderers, adulterers, and perjurers suffered torment, while the dragon Nidhogg sucked the blood from their bodies. Mention is made in an early poem of the 9 worlds of Niflheim. It was said that those who fell in battle did not go to hell, but to the god Odin in Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain. So Hell is obviously a pretty powerful deity in the Norse religion, and it would make a lot of sense if Krampus is their son. That's what some people believe in regards to the half goat, half demon. The whole origin story of Krampus, it's pretty hazy right now, but a demon that has the strength of Krampus would most likely come from somebody like Hell. Hell is a woman though, and is portrayed as such, and therefore it kind of begs the question, why would Krampus take the appearance of a goat-like creature? There's also no mention to the father of Krampus, or if he even has one. If this was the case and Krampus was the son to Hell, then potentially when he kidnaps the bad children, he's actually taking them to his mother's evil domain to live out the rest of their days there. It's not really been confirmed, so honestly guys, comment down below if you think this is possible, and if not, then what do you think Krampus's real origin story is? Number 2 on this list is the Catholic conspiracy. The legend of Krampus is said to have started in Austria many hundreds and hundreds of years ago. When it was starting, Christianity was growing very quickly and was gaining a lot of power around the world. The legend came out and obviously sort of goes against what the Bible says about Christmas time. After all, Christmas time is a time to worship Christ, not fear Krampus. Therefore, at the beginning of the legend of Krampus, the Catholic Church actually banned any mention of him and tried to snuff it out as soon as possible. Now on the surface, this looks as if the church is totally against the legend of Krampus, but some conspiracy theories have surfaced about how they may have actually started the whole thing to begin with. Krampus is believed to go after bad children who don't believe in Christmas. His punishments are brutal and can even be fatal. The best defense against Krampus is to fully buy into Christmas and be as good as possible all year long. Well, back then, fully buying into Christmas meant fully buying into the Catholic Church. The only way to stay safe from Krampus would be to go to church and be a good law-abiding citizen, and then all would be well. So when you think about it like that, it actually makes a lot of sense that this legend would have benefited the church's narrative. But if that's the case, well, why did they try to ban it? Well, the best way to make the public scared of something is if you yourself are scared of it as well. By completely banning the legend of Krampus, it actually gives the legend more power and more strength than if they just acknowledged it and then ignored it. This would have created the narrative that the church is actually scared of Krampus and therefore you or I should also be. It may be a little bit of a stretch, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tried to create this legend to use it for personal gain, and the church, they may have just been the ones to do that. Number 1 on this list is his minions. One of the most known characteristics of Santa Claus are the joyous little elves that help him at the North Pole year round. These little creatures are fun and festive helpers that make all the presents and run the whole Santa Claus operation. Considering Krampus is the antithesis of Santa Claus, some people have speculated that Krampus has these helpers as well, except they aren't kind-loving elves. In a recent video, I spoke about the Yule Lads. The Yule Lads are 13 tiny gnome-like creatures that live with Gryla, a horrible ogre-like witch who eats around Christmas time. Now it's very possible that Krampus also has some Yule Lads of his own, or something very similar working for him. Some people even believe that instead of going to the torture chamber forever, the children that Krampus has taken, they're forced to work at his lair for the rest of their lives. That their bodies change into these demon-like helpers that must worship Krampus at all times and do his bidding. What isn't really talked about too much though is what these former humans would actually be working on. Santa Claus has presents that need to be made all year long, but Krampus doesn't give out any presents, he just gives out beatings. Potentially, Krampus has some other work that needs to be done in the underworld that we don't know about, considering he would be a pretty high-ranking demon. Either way, it's very likely that he doesn't live alone and probably has a bunch of demon helpers, potentially the people he's kidnapped, working for him year-round. Number 5 on this list is that Bigfoot was a government experiment. The legend of Bigfoot has been circulating around the globe for quite some time now. Some of the earliest records of the creature are from the late 1800s when a British Columbian newspaper wrote about a gorilla type of creature that was wandering around the woods in the area. Since then, the rumors and the lore have exploded and reached an all-time high in the 70s. This was also around the time that the FBI got involved. The American government actually got involved with the investigations that were happening with Bigfoot in the 1970s. Peter Byron, who's a leading expert on Bigfoot, sent some unidentified hair to the FBI and told them that his group needed the government's help. They'd found the hairs and weren't sure what kind of animal it belonged to. They thought that this hair may be some of the first legitimate proof of a new species or potentially even Bigfoot. The crazy thing was that the FBI, they took it seriously. They snatched up the hairs and ran some tests on them, eventually concluding that they were actually the hairs of a deer. But the fact that the FBI, a super high-ranking government agency, took actual time and money to investigate these claims, well, it got people speculating that the government maybe had something to do with Bigfoot in the first place. The possibility of a government experiment that resulted in the creation of Bigfoot is a growing theory in the community. The government may have been performing some tests on animals, created Bigfoot, and then through some accident, Bigfoot got loose. I imagine that the government wouldn't want to own up to something like this because not only would it make them look highly inept to let a massive animal like this out on the loose, but there would also be a lot of moral questions being thrown at them from the public about genetic mutation like that. We've seen scientists in other countries before conduct genetic mutations like this, so it's not completely unrealistic to believe that this could have actually been the origin of Bigfoot. What makes this so scary though is that if this truly was the case, then what other creatures are the government engineering right now behind closed doors that we don't know about? Number 4 on this list is the Bigfoot species. What's scarier than just one Bigfoot? How about an entire colony of them? Bigfoot has often been depicted as a giant ape-like cryptid that stands anywhere from 6 to 15 feet tall. It stands on 2 legs, can emit a super high-pitched cry that can destroy someone's eardrums, and has a footstep that is roughly 24 inches in length. This massive size also contributes to the reports of its massive strength as well, with most people thinking that it's several times stronger than the strongest bear we have on the planet. All this being said, you certainly wouldn't want to run into this thing in the forest by yourself. The good news is that running into Bigfoot would be pretty hard to do because many people believe that there's only one Bigfoot. There are thousands of forests around the world, and the likelihood of running into the one singular Bigfoot, well, it's pretty slim. However, your odds increase dramatically if, well, there's actually a collection of these creatures. Assuming that Bigfoot wasn't a one-off government experiment, then it's pretty ridiculous for us to assume that there's only one of these creatures. Bigfoot would be a totally new species that we've never seen before, and to even get to this point of evolution, there would have needed to be more of them along the way. It should also be noted that there have been sightings of this beast in the forests of British Columbia and California, but then also a bunch of sightings in places like Maine and Ohio. Maine and Ohio are pretty far from British Columbia and California, and unless this singular Bigfoot is the most athletic creature on the planet, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that it would regularly be running back and forth between these two places. What's far more likely is that there are several Bigfoot families in these regions. That potentially there's 1 or 2 families of the species in the west and a few in the east as well. That would still fit into the narrative of sightings being very rare, but would make a lot more sense than the singular Sasquatch. Geez, try saying that 5 times fast, guys. Singular Sasquatch, it's tough. If this is the case though, then it means that Bigfoot is probably slowly growing in number. Without any natural predators, one would think that as the years go by, more Sasquatches will continue to pop up, which in turn drastically increases the chance that we do have an encounter with this thing in the forest one day. Number 3 on this list is that Bigfoot is actually a demon. For years, Bigfoot has been talked about as being a creature, a massive mystical ape that may have evolved from gorillas at some point to become what it is now. But this also seems a tad bit far-fetched based on how little sightings there are of it. How is it possible that a creature that's so big hasn't ever been confirmed? The only explanation that I can think of is that Bigfoot's actually a demon. If Bigfoot is actually a mythical demon creature from hell, then it makes sense why we don't have regular sightings of it. It can go between hell and earth whenever it feels like, and potentially has the capability to turn invisible if it wants. If it was a demon, then it would remind me a lot of some of the ancient Greek demon creatures from mythology. Hades' 3-headed dog, Cerberus, comes to mind as a potential comparison. Now, if Bigfoot was actually a demonic creature from hell, then it begs the question, what is it doing here? Well, we may never know that. Sometimes devilish creatures just come to Earth for the sake of coming to Earth. For instance, there's an area called the Devil's Tramping Grounds in North Carolina where it's believed that the devil comes often and dances there. It's possible that Bigfoot does something similar in the forests of North America. It's also possible, however, that Bigfoot is up to some demonic mission. Potentially it's tasked with having individuals go missing in the forest and bringing them back to hell. Or maybe it's just the keeper of these woods and haunts them like a ghost would a house. Whatever the case is, I actually much prefer the idea that Bigfoot is just a big ape that has evolved. The second that we start throwing in the idea of a demon, he gets way more dangerous in my opinion. Number 2 on this list is the Bigfoot curse. We've talked already in this video about how Bigfoot could have been an experiment done by the government or maybe just a product of evolution, but what if there's an actual curse that's going on here? Some of the First Nations who were around during the beginning of the Bigfoot legend believed that Bigfoot was actually a man that had been turned into this hunking hairy beast and had been given special powers and abilities. These powers and abilities though were at the cost of his human appearance, memories, and ability to communicate with our species in general. They worried that this curse could be passed on, and that if you didn't respect the forest, that this curse may find you next. This curse legend also sort of started the association with Bigfoot and environmental care. For a while there, Bigfoot was portrayed as an evil creature lurking around the woods, ready to pounce on unsuspecting victims. But in the 80s, the narrative changed a little bit. Bigfoot could potentially be the guardian of the forest and someone who's here to remind us that we need to protect our environment. This urban legend takes that a step further and says that this creature was actually once a person. Maybe this person who was cursed to be Bigfoot didn't care enough about our forest forests, and now they're cursed to forever be this giant beast and to live in the woods alone. This would be to show someone what it's like to have this forest be your home. I like the idea behind this curse. I think all of us should be a little bit more environmentally conscious. However, it's kind of scary to think that I could turn into Bigfoot and live alone, misunderstood in the woods for the rest of my life. Probably not the coolest existence, to be honest. Number 1 on this list is the Bigfoot omen. Seeing Bigfoot is something that only a handful of people have ever done in their lives. This is why, to this day, its existence hasn't been able to be confirmed. As cool as it would be to see this creature and know for sure that the stories are accurate, some say that it might be the worst omen of your life. Is it possible that all of the limited sightings of Bigfoot through the years haven't just been a coincidence, but they've actually been on purpose? What if Bigfoot chooses who it shows itself to? What if these encounters aren't just by chance, but it's actually an omen? This is what a lot of people believe in regards to this creature. The Ojibwe of the Northern Plains believed that seeing this beast was an omen of bad luck or a warning of incoming misfortune. This is especially scary for all those Bigfoot enthusiasts out there trying to find Bigfoot, because if you ever actually do see the beast, then it might be the last thing you ever do. Personally, I find this urban legend to be a tad bit hard to believe. Bigfoot is a legendary creature that's said to be magnificent and majestic. Seeing this thing out in the wild, assuming it doesn't attack you, would honestly be a life-changing event. I would have hoped that seeing it would have even brought you good luck. Fingers crossed that my version of events is the right one, and seeing this creature isn't an indicator of an unavoidable morbid future. Number 5 on this list is a super weapon. One thing that's widely believed about Area 51 is that for a while it was used as a place to develop and test nuclear weapons. Located out in the middle of the desert, very secluded, it made for the perfect spot to develop such deadly weapons. As time went on and the Cold War quieted down, there was less of an emphasis on manufacturing such bombs. In fact, dismantling these bombs has been something that's been going on for quite some time in an effort to make sure we avoid nuclear annihilation of the entire planet. This is all well and good and probably the best thing for all of us. But some believe that this site is kept so secret because there's another type of weapon at play. Nobody knows exactly what it could be, but some people speculate that the United States government specifically uses this site as a place to develop a super weapon. Something that the world would have never seen before. Whether this weapon would take the place of a bomb or a gun or a pathogen is currently unknown, but it would dwarf the atomic bomb in deadliness for sure. Dismantling all atomic bombs looks really good in the tabloids. Making a massive super weapon that could destroy entire countries doesn't look nearly as good. This is why the government has made it their mission to keep it all under wraps. Also, if word got out that the government was trying to make some sort of super weapon, well, it doesn't matter what the actual intentions behind the weapon are, other countries would interpret that as very threatening. They would then either need to build their own super weapon or try to stop America from ever completing the construction of theirs. Both of these scenarios would be very bad for humanity and is definitely something that the American government would want to avoid. I have no idea what this super weapon could be or what it could entail, but if America was making something like this, you have to imagine that Area 51 would be the spot for it. Number 4 on this list is the moon landing. With the Cold War at its height and the space race in full swing, the United States in 1969 made the first successful moon landing in human history. Or at least, that's what they wanted us to think. Ever since the moon landing took place, conspiracy theories of its validity have run rampant. Many people believe that the Americans never really landed on the moon in 1969, but just faked the whole thing to get a leg up in the Cold War. Most people believe that Area 51 was the site where they filmed the whole thing. Area 51 is a massive space that's super closed off to the public. This would be the perfect location to film something like the moon landing if you ever were to do such a thing. You wouldn't want to draw attention to a set like this, so renting out a studio in LA probably wouldn't have been the best idea. If this is true, then it also begs the question, how many other things have been doctored here? Does the United States regularly film stuff here that isn't real and then release that to the public? Unless somebody comes out from the film crew that made this fake video, sadly, we probably won't ever know. Number 3 on this list is Mutant Experiments. Aliens are obviously the first thing that we think about when it comes to Area 51, but maybe there are some other strange creatures that are hiding at this base. If you've ever seen the show Stranger Things or are regular on videos like this, then I imagine you've probably heard of the project MK Ultra. If you haven't, then this was an illegal project conducted by the CIA starting in the 50s to try and wield the power of mind control. Through a series of horrible experiments, the CIA would take people, often give them large amounts of hallucinogens, and then subject them to forms of psychological torture. Lots of the people that took part in these experiments were horribly scarred for life, and most of them never recovered. This whole process broke so many human rights violations and really was not a good look for the American government. They eventually stopped in the 70s, and when this info was finally released to the public, faced some pretty bad backlash because of it. Experiments of this nature may not be happening anymore, but many have speculated that something similar could very easily be going on at Area 51. In 2018, new documents were released about MKUltra, and it showed that the CIA had 6 dogs run, then stop, then all turn around and run back, all from implanting brain chips in them. Is it possible that something similar is going on here, where maybe they're making some mutant controllable animal? What about experiments involving humans that the government doesn't want reaching the public? If they've done it before, then there's no reason to think that they aren't capable of doing it now. Maybe these experiments don't involve mind control, but potentially taking some characteristics of an animal and putting them into a human. We've seen over the past decades a growing interest in mutant animals, so there's no reason to think that one bright scientist wouldn't want to try this with people as well. We obviously don't know for sure, but a secluded, secretive base in the desert is pretty much the perfect spot to perform mutant experiments if you ever were to do such a thing. Number 2 on this list is the Roswell incident. According to Wikipedia, the Roswell incident is the 1947 recovery of balloon debris from a ranch near Corona, New Mexico by United States Army Air Forces officers from Roswell Army Airfield, and the conspiracy theories decades later claiming that the debris involved a flying saucer and that the truth had been covered up by the United States government. Well, many people believe that this apparent flying saucer is currently residing in Area 51. This is what you've heard about Area 51 for. This is where it's got its big name: alien tech. This site is used as a secret base to investigate alien technology. This alien tech is getting regularly tested and experimented with by the government at this site. Some believe that America got these UFOs, brought them to this site, and now are trying to reconstruct them and use that technology to build their own advanced spacecraft. Whether the spaceships that they're in possession of have advanced weaponry on them, that's unknown, but one has to imagine that they would contribute to warfare in some capacity. One also has to imagine that if America got access to flying saucers in 1947, that they've probably succeeded by now in their attempts at remanufacturing said flying saucers. Who knows what sort of crazy otherworldly tech is being stored in Area 51 that is super top secret? How much does the government actually know about extraterrestrial life that they aren't telling you? I can't say for sure, but I'd hedge my bets that the answers are in that base. Number 1 on this list is aliens. We just talked about how they probably have alien tech chilling at Area 51. Well, how about the actual extraterrestrials who made that tech? Many people believe that Area 51 is not only a spot for testing alien equipment, but also a holding spot for any aliens that the government has come into contact with. It's very likely that these aliens are already dead, but I also don't see why it wouldn't be possible for them to potentially have some of these aliens alive and just locked up. Having alien life locked up in a very secret base is something that you wouldn't want getting out to the public, but it isn't just humans you'd need to worry about. If this is true, and this info was confirmed and then leaked to the public, well, I can only imagine the species of alien that our prisoner belongs to would want to get their friend back. If they were intelligent enough to get to this planet with supposed advanced technology, then we can only assume that they're a superior being to us. Having a superior being pissed off with the entirety of the human race probably isn't the best idea and something that should be avoided at all costs. Also, even if this alien's friends didn't care and just left their buddy behind, well, the panic and chaos that this would cause in the world would be insane. One would have to assume that other countries would be demanding to investigate the alien for themselves, that the global public would want answers and would be irate if we didn't get them, that people would start to lose their minds worrying about the possibility of aliens attacking the planet. It makes perfect sense why the American government wouldn't want people to know about such a thing. And honestly, when I think about it more, maybe ignorance truly is bliss when it comes to Area 51.